For millions of movie fans, the quiet wisdom of Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid represents patience, balance, and strength that doesn't rely on force. The character felt timeless, as if he had always existed somewhere beyond the screen. But the man behind that role, Pat Morita, lived a life that was far more complicated than the calm mentor audiences remember. Long before he became a cultural icon, Morita was a struggling actor trying to survive in an industry that rarely saw people like him as serious performers. Hollywood often treated Asian actors as background figures or comic relief. Because of that, Morita spent decades moving from one small opportunity to another, never quite reaching the recognition his talent deserved. When people look back at The Karate Kid, it's easy to assume the casting of Mr. Miyagi was obvious. In reality, it was anything but certain. Morita's journey to that role was shaped by hardship, persistence, and moments of unlikely luck. Understanding that journey reveals something deeper about Hollywood itself, how easily meaningful talent can be overlooked, and how sometimes the most unforgettable performances come from people the industry nearly ignored completely. Pat Morita's life story began with challenges that few people in entertainment ever experience. Born in California to Japanese immigrant parents, his earliest years were defined not by play or freedom, but by illness. As a toddler, Morita was diagnosed with spinal tuberculosis, a serious condition that required years of medical treatment. Doctors kept him confined to hospitals and rehabilitation facilities for much of his childhood. During those years, he wore body casts and leg braces and spent long periods unable to move freely. For a child, that kind of isolation can shape a person's outlook in profound ways. Morita later reflected that he had to learn patience earlier than most people ever do. While other children ran outside and played, he learned to observe, listen, and imagine. Eventually, he recovered enough to walk again, something doctors once feared might never happen. But just as his life seemed ready to begin normally, history intervened. During World War II, the United States government forced thousands of Japanese American families into internment camps. Morita and his family were among them, abruptly removed from their community and placed under armed supervision. Those experiences left lasting emotional impressions that would later influence the depth audiences saw in his performances. After the war ended, Morita's family tried to rebuild their lives like many other displaced families. They eventually opened a small restaurant in California, and it was in that environment that Morita first discovered the power of humor. Working around customers every day, he learned how laughter could ease tension and create connection between strangers. Comedy became more than entertainment. It became a survival skill. For Morita, humor helped transform difficult experiences into stories that people could relate to. Yet at the same time, he understood the limits placed on him. The entertainment industry during that era offered very few opportunities for Asian American performers. Leading roles were rare, and even supporting roles often relied on stereotypes. Because of that uncertainty, Morita initially pursued a stable career working with computers at an aerospace company. Acting remained a distant dream rather than a practical goal. But the creative pull never completely disappeared. In his early 30s, he made a decision that many people around him considered risky. He left his steady job and committed himself to performing full-time. At the time, there were no guarantees of success, and the path ahead looked uncertain. Morita began building his career in small comedy clubs and night spots throughout California. Stand-up comedy allowed him to shape his own voice in a way traditional acting roles did not. On stage, he could speak about his life experiences directly, often mixing personal stories with observational humor. Audiences responded warmly, appreciating the honesty behind his jokes. Still, success in comedy did not automatically translate into meaningful acting roles. Television producers frequently invited him to appear in short comedic segments or minor characters, but those roles rarely carried depth or development. Many were built around exaggerated accents or one-note stereotypes that reflected Hollywood's limited imagination at the time. Morita accepted the work because it allowed him to stay in the industry. Yet he was aware that those roles did not represent the full range of what he could do. Even so, he continued performing, building a reputation for reliability and professionalism. Gradually, his persistence began to pay off. Small television appearances turned into recurring opportunities, and casting directors started recognizing his presence. It wasn't a sudden breakthrough, but rather a slow accumulation of experience that helped him develop the calm, controlled acting style audiences would later recognize. One of Morita's most visible early roles came through the popular television series Happy Days. In the show, he played Arnold, the friendly owner of a diner where characters often gathered. The role brought him national attention and made his face recognizable to millions of viewers. For the first time, he experienced the kind of exposure that actors hope will lead to broader opportunities. Yet the success carried an unexpected complication. Because Arnold was a comedic character, many producers began to view Morita primarily as a comic performer rather than a dramatic actor. In Hollywood, labels can stick quickly. Once an actor becomes associated with a certain type of role, it can be difficult to convince studios to see them differently. Morita even received his own sitcom for a brief time, but it struggled to find a large audience and ended sooner than expected. After that, the momentum he had built began to slow again. Offers became less frequent, and he found himself searching for new ways to keep working. For many performers, this stage of a career can be discouraging, especially when it follows a moment of national visibility. During the late 1970s, Morita experienced one of the most uncertain periods of his professional life. Work in television and film became increasingly scarce, and he eventually moved to Hawaii, partly to reduce expenses and partly to reset his perspective. While living there, he continued performing in smaller venues and occasionally writing advertising material or hosting events. These jobs kept him active, but did not offer the sense of direction he had once hoped for. It was a time when many actors might have quietly stepped away from the industry altogether. Morita later described feeling both grateful for the work he still had and frustrated by the lack of meaningful roles. Comedy, which had once opened doors for him, now seemed to limit how people perceived him. Producers expected humor and lighthearted characters, while he hoped for roles that allowed emotional complexity. This tension created a sense that his career might slowly fade without ever reaching its full potential. Yet what Morita did not realize was that a script was already circulating in Hollywood that would soon transform his life in ways he could not have predicted. The script that would eventually become The Karate Kid was initially viewed as a modest project. It centered on a teenager learning martial arts from an older mentor, combining sports drama with a coming-of-age story. When Morita first encountered the script through his agent, he was intrigued by the character of Mr. Miyagi. Unlike many roles written for Asian actors at the time, Miyagi was thoughtful, emotionally layered, and central to the story's message. However, the casting process was far from straightforward. Some producers hesitated to consider Morita because of his strong association with comedy. They worried that audiences might not take him seriously in a dramatic mentor role. Director John G. Avildsen, however, saw potential in Morita's quiet presence. During early meetings and auditions, the director noticed something different in Morita's approach. Rather than playing the character as exaggerated or mystical, he emphasized subtle emotion and restraint. That interpretation gave the role a sense of authenticity that resonated strongly with the film's themes. Morita approached the preparation for Mr. Miyagi with careful attention. Instead of focusing only on martial arts techniques, he studied the cultural and historical background that might shape a character like Miyagi. He considered how experiences such as immigration, war, and personal loss could influence a person's outlook on life. These reflections helped him build a character who spoke softly, yet carried deep emotional weight. On set, Morita often favored stillness over dramatic gestures. Small pauses, thoughtful expressions, and gentle humor became defining elements of the performance. That approach contrasted with the louder style often seen in action films of the era. For audiences, it created a mentor figure who felt genuine rather than theatrical. Miyagi's lessons were not delivered as flashy speeches, but as simple observations about patience, discipline, and balance. Those qualities allowed viewers of all ages to connect with the character, even if they had never practiced martial arts themselves. When The Karate Kid was released in 1984, it quickly resonated with audiences around the world. The film combined an underdog sports story with universal themes about guidance, perseverance, and personal growth. While the young protagonist carried the narrative forward, many viewers found themselves most drawn to Mr. Miyagi. His calm demeanor and thoughtful advice stood out in a genre often dominated by aggressive competition. Morita's performance brought warmth and humanity to the film, transforming the character into more than just a teacher of fighting techniques. Instead, Miyagi represented the idea that true strength involves patience, humility, and self-control. The performance earned Morita an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor, a recognition that surprised many who had previously known him only for comedic roles. Although he did not win the award, the nomination itself marked an important milestone in his career and introduced him to a new generation of viewers who appreciated his dramatic ability. Following the success of the first film, Morita returned to the role of Mr. Miyagi in several sequels. Each installment expanded the character's story and reinforced his role as the emotional center of the series. Audiences continued to respond enthusiastically, and the character became a lasting symbol of mentorship in popular culture. Karate schools reported increased interest, and many parents referenced Miyagi's philosophy when teaching discipline to their children. Despite this popularity, Morita encountered a familiar challenge. Hollywood still struggled to imagine him in roles that were significantly different from the wise mentor he had portrayed so effectively. Offers often resembled variations of the same character, rather than entirely new opportunities. While he remained grateful for the impact Miyagi had made, he also recognized the limitations that came with being strongly associated with one iconic role. In later interviews, Morita spoke thoughtfully about the complex nature of fame. He acknowledged that the Karate Kid changed his life and introduced his work to millions of people. At the same time, he emphasized how easily that opportunity might never have happened. Casting decisions often depend on timing, persistence, and the willingness of someone in the industry to see potential where others do not. Morita credited the film's director for recognizing a side of him that had rarely been visible on screen before. He also reflected on the importance of resilience in an unpredictable profession. For decades, he had continued performing despite setbacks, uncertain whether a defining opportunity would ever arrive. His story serves as a reminder that careers in the arts rarely follow a simple path. Sometimes the moment that defines an actor's legacy arrives after years of quiet effort that few people notice. Pat Morita passed away in 2005, leaving behind a legacy that continues to resonate with audiences today. While many people remember him primarily as Mr. Miyagi, his life story extends far beyond that single role. From overcoming childhood illness to navigating the challenges of discrimination and limited opportunities in Hollywood, Morita demonstrated resilience throughout his career. The character he created in The Karate Kid remains powerful not only because of the script, but because of the experiences he brought into the performance. Miyagi's wisdom, patience, and humility reflected qualities Morita had developed through decades of personal struggle and perseverance. Looking back, it becomes clear that the film did more than launch a memorable character. It revealed the depth of an actor who had spent years waiting for the right opportunity to show what he could truly do. In that sense, Morita's story reminds us that sometimes the most meaningful voices in storytelling are the ones that nearly went unheard.